Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the State of the AI Union. I'm your host, Laura, and joined with me is Warren Kucker, CRO at Basic, and which is a company built around conversations. I am going to actually let Warren introduce himself and also Basic.
Yeah, absolutely. So really briefly, three-time founder, 18 years in like shipping and logistics. My first startup was based on an idea that we had at Apple. And 2 years in logistics I had there. Made sense to go do it for some other companies. And 15 pivots later, we had a couple of decent exits. A couple of pit stops along the way. I basically converted myself from a founder into a sales leader. Let's say an average sales leader from a founder-led sales motion and then back into the startup game. Basic is, yes, around conversational intelligence that I'm excited to talk about today.
Yeah, fantastic. Warren, first, actually tell us about that move to, leading a sales team from being a founder.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating when you make the shift from like a founder-led sales model to running like a growth Series A through Series C sales motion, right? You really get to starkly see when you're on the other side of the fence the differences and the pitfalls when you're making that transition, right? Founder led sales is all about story, industry expertise, like charisma, and very little about sales process. When it's time to hire those like sales leaders who then hire your first like group of reps, translating that to that team could be like really painful and honestly is a huge failure point for folks, right? Like, what's the right amount? You want to keep the founder involved, but you don't want them to be overly involved. So, like, you still want to keep that industry knowledge, that expertise, bringing that in for that like executive to executive connection. But like the deals need to be run at the team level. And on top of it, the reps need to be really well versed in the product and the industry as well. That transition is really painful, honestly. So like I've seen both sides of the fence. And I think that's generally over the past 3 years become kind of like my niche and expertise in go to market.
Yeah. And you've talked a little bit about like how sales and conversations come together and where that's sort of like a lot of selling happens in the conversation. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So like when you think about like conversations as a whole, right? So like in general, Forbes wrote that 19 we're taking about 2.2 hours worth a day of meetings just to cross the enterprise. And now we're at about 5.1. So like a mini like COVID effect on how often we're meeting all day, right? What's happening is like work has become the meeting, right? So like work product is kind of incidental to those, right? So like leveraging those meetings appropriately is like foundationally important for organizations, right? If you look at this, sales in particular is the obvious like culprit here. That all salespeople do is take meetings with prospective customers and then send emails to those prospective customers in between those meetings. That's how salespeople close deals, right? This was a bit of a black box prior to LLMs, right? Like it's just, you didn't have the ability to have the context from that information really easily at your fingertips. Like compare it to like the index of a book. You can like look up a word in your sales meetings, like you would in an index in a book and find the page that word was on, but you don't know what was discussed around that word. Now with LLMs in sales and in all things enterprise meetings, you could really like connect your conversations to your workflows much more robustly.
Yeah. And I really resonate with that because today one of my meetings wasn't recorded. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot to take notes. I said to go off all of my memory. But anyway, talking about, speaking about like meetings and like having all of the conversations come together, we used to solve this problem with sort of work management with some of these tools like Asana, Notion, and all of that. Tell me what you feel like are the gaps between what those tools were like pre GPT and now post GPT.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about what's happening in a 30-minute meeting, generally a 30-minute meeting, about 15 pages of a standard size book of information is being shared, regardless of how many people are in that meeting, right? Just speed of chatter, lack of dead space, 15 pages of a book for every 30-minute meeting that's had, right? What generally in the past has happened to it, even when we have call recording software, is we translate that 30-minute meeting into a couple of tasks in Asana or an email to someone else asking them for advice or telling them about work they have to do. Like it's a supreme condensing, right? It's like the Bluetoothification of meeting information, right? You lose so much context involved with that meeting. On top of it, let's say that meeting had a lot of value, whether it's external meeting with customers, vendors, prospects, or an internal meeting to your teams. You have to decide like what the three things are the most important thing from that meeting and put them into Asana, right? Like generally one person would do that. And Asana is a great tool, but you're losing so much context there. A year later, there could have been something else in that meeting that is now valuable. Think about the transition from traditional computing to LLMs. We don't know what would have been important to know from a workflow standpoint when talking to our customers and vendors from conversations 3 years ago that it's gone, it's dead, right? So like that like it's just an overlay condensing the information, and there's a selection bias as to like who chose what was most important from that meeting and that we don't have to suffer through anymore.
And so that's that gap. That's what you're calling the conversation to action gap.
Yes, I think the best way to close it is to connect those meetings to the workflows that are related to those meetings as closely as possible, skipping the Asana step and actually getting that context close to the work that needs to be done. And closing that gap would be one of the biggest advantages of the next couple of years with the new LLMs.
Yeah. Tell me your thoughts about this. So, in one of my prior episodes, we talked about the AI grind mode versus vibe mode, where grind mode was where AI was creating like more work, right? Like it was creating the need to read the transcript and read the notes and read more things around what AI could do. And vibe mode is, letting it sort of like do the work for you in a sense. Give me your perspective.
Yeah, grind mode versus vibe mode is a really good contextual way to put it. The problem I think that we're going to run into in grind mode is that great, we have a lot more information. We have a 30-minute meeting. We're not boiling it down to 3 bullet points anymore. Well, do I have to process that information? Now every meeting is just like a robust, like what happened in the meeting. Here's all the work that needs to be done. Here's all the context you could ever have. That's going to create problems along the actual like mental capacity to process that, right? No one is leaving at 5 o'clock and being like, you know what? My brain is so fresh. Like I executed tons of work right now prior to LLMs. And I'm just like, I could do so much more work, but I don't need to because work is done, right? They were already overloaded with information. We're going to be cramming more information into that thought space.
Yeah.
So I think there's a combination of the two, right? When we have to trust that, like on the vibe mode side, that certain types of work can be done by the LLMs well. I think the easiest way to put it is writing. LLMs do two things really well: structure unstructured data and write. I think we're going to have to get past the fact that, like, when you're writing an email or a one-page document or creating like a PDF guide, that we need to read everything that was done and we can't just like send that on its way at some point. The writing piece will help reduce that contextual space. But I think the second piece, it's going to be up to the software providers of LLM technology. Let's say that let's call them the LLM wrappers, which is a disparaging term right now, but the software to figure out how to surface the right information at the right time in a digestible way to help the user to reduce the complexity rather than increase it. That's going to be the key. Simple software leveraging backend technology. So like grind mode with a lot of vibe underneath the like kind of water level there.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is I've been having a lot of this conversation with my SDRs recently. I actually also have the SDRs under me. And a lot of it is actually teaching them how to have good conversations instead of having the LLM have the conversation like for them. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, give me what's an example of something like that, like you teach them about like orchestrating the conversation.
Like, for example, things like, oh, pausing, like learning to listen, not going five five line pitch straight away, right? Those are things that the LLM can generate for us really well. It can generate a really good like five-line pitch, but it's the
Right.
way in which we deliver the conversation that you know I feel only humans can do this. But help me with your perspective here.
That's a good way. Let me take 2 points there. Let's come to that core point. I think this is a great example of like in the past, what you had to do is spend a lot of time developing that 5 line pitch, right? So like I have to figure out based on my memory and all the conversations I have and product marketing and my sales leadership, what's the 5 line pitch? That was an intensive exercise that generally what would happen is you'd spend couple weeks working through it and then you wouldn't touch it for a year, right? So that would be it. It's just like gathers dust. And then maybe it's like, you know what, this pitch might not be working so well. Let's try something else. I think LLMs can do a lot of the, like, say, vibe work underneath like the water level again, and then enable it so that like you're taking that pitch and you're doing a better job putting it into action, right? How do you use pace, speed, tone on, especially like for an SDR who has to do this on, let's say, a cold call, right? To sound confident with the pitch. And so now that's the 70% of work that I'm doing rather than the generation of it. I think secondarily, if you take a broader view of this problem, what you're going to be able to do is iterate better on this, right? So like we actually should orchestrate conversations in a way that like the LLMs will get an advantage from that conversation. A good example is something we may have to do in the future is not topic switch so much. If you can actually stay on topic within a conversation, then the LLM has a better job of knowing that that topic in its entirety is the information set that it should know about that topic, rather than a scattered series of like conversations that it's going to parse out kind of incorrectly. It's the same thing. Like I get really explicit about to dos on calls now. Hey, by next Wednesday, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then by the following Wednesday, I'm going to do A. Because I know the LLMs can then take that batch and create my task for me automatically as a reminder. We probably have to get a little bit more skillful with how we're orchestrating meetings and conversations to leverage the technology appropriately. And I think the gains are going to be X compared to what they are right now.
I actually love that term that you use, conversation orchestration, right? It's like talking with the expectation that the LLM is listening and structuring it so that the LLM can actually do a good job of making sure that the work translates into more vibing rather than more
Yep.
grinding for you. And it's almost like, as an executive, you might go into a meeting having a really good structure of what the meeting looks like, and it's your responsibility to hold that meeting with that structure. But now everybody has to be the executive because the LLMs are the people attending the meeting, really.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly right. That's a really good distillation of that.
Yeah, yeah. And going back to conversational intelligence, right? So a lot of conversational intelligence right now focuses on content. And there are some things around like, well, did you pause? How much did you speak? How do you think this conversational intelligence will change to pick up on the things that I was talking about, for example, coaching the SDRs on, like, are you picking up tone? Are you listening well? Are you responding to the right questions? Did they really ask this thing?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, right? So if you look at, it's kind of like the index example we talked about, the index of a book, searching for a word and finding it. In the past, you had like a number. Hey, good reps talk 40% of the time on their
Yes.
calls. And this is their pace. And you had that kind of like dashboard as to how you were speaking, right? The LLMs, I don't think are quite there yet for this, but I think we're going to get there quickly. Is that you could actually combine a couple of factors in what you said, the content, the speed, the pace, and then the relevancy. Like, did you respond to the question asked, or did you ask a question that was kind of relevant to the stream of the conversation? And then how your like conversational counterparty reacted to that, right? So, like, what was the reaction you explicit? Let's get really fundamental cold calls, right? There are a series on a cold calls, 4 to 8 objections that you should be able to handle on a call, right? And really the answer is more like four. Let's go four is I'm not interested. I'm walking on a plane, which is a common one. Everyone's flying when you're cold calling them, right? Like the reactions to that are more important than what you said because what you said is repetitive. But you can combine those two. You can combine the analytics of how you said it, pace, speed, what you said, and then what drove the interaction, and then your response to that interaction. I think we're going to be able to get layered to be like, not like you spoke 40% of the time or at this pace, but what you say generally elicits this reaction, and then you respond this way. When you book meetings, the appropriate way to do it is a different messaging or a different response, right? Like that back and forth could be really valuable. LLMs aren't quite there yet. I don't think it does a great job of relating this chunk of conversation to this chunk of conversation to this chunk of conversation and seeing how the interaction went. But I think we're like 2 or 3 model improvements away from that type of like, how is your information being received in the way you're trying to convey it?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, talk to me about what that closing the gap on conversation to action looks like today, and then what it may look like in, let's say, 9 months, 9 to 12 months.
Yeah. So right now, what we need to understand is it still comes down to like good old fashioned understanding people's core workflows, right? So I'll give a good example. We talked a lot about sales. Let's talk about product management, right? The ideal for what product managers should be doing is taking feedback from their internal teams, their prospects, and their customers, and collating that product feedback, perceived gaps, feature lapses, bugs, those types of things, and using it to prioritize roadmap for the engineering teams. All of that first part happens in conversation. There's no like, no one really sends an email, right? Like around this, it's the most robust information around the product in terms of happens in meetings that are happening that were previously locked away. Great. What should happen then is like you should work on the highest revenue impact, whether it's increasing revenue or reducing churn. That's what a product manager should do. What does
Mm,
a product manager actually do on a day to day basis? They are firefighters for engineering teams, right? Like what they're doing most of the time is not that collation of work from the conversation piece, right? They are like making sure the engineering teams don't go way off base as to what they like build and waste a bunch of time and build product that doesn't make any sense. They're in 30 hours a week of meetings just doing that, right? So, two things there. On one hand, the current scenario is we should be that firefighting, we should be taking those conversations and finding better ways to firefight. So, like, how do you take those, what they're doing right now, and saying, great, like, I need to analyze what types of tickets are being described that are creating poor code based on the conversations I'm having. Great. That can happen right now. What needs to happen is the stuff that never happens, the customer feedback loop, that's the idealized version, needs to be the AI vibe, right? We need to create pieces of software that casually surfaces up to the product manager. Hey, like this feature gap has been discussed 3 times. The opportunity amount on those 3 discussions now is about 800,000. The weighted opportunity amount's 220K based on stage. Do you think this is something that you should work on? Right. Like, and then it helps you work on that discussion. That's the casual surfacing of these problems. In between those meetings, that's workflow specific is what needs to happen forward looking.
okay. Okay. So you're thinking that the forward looking piece of it is really that feedback loop and coming around across all of like like what you said, like joining the conversations
Yeah,
basically.
and the suggestion of like work is like this is the context. Like, hey, you have a little bit of free time. Do you think you might want to take a look at this because it might be high priority? No, that's not high priority. Cool, take it off the take it off the list. Right? It's just surfacing that context at the right time because there's so much more information. I think is going to be how humans need to work with all of this information flying around over the next like 5 to 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like it's kind of like distilling maybe is not the right word. I don't know, like unifying, aggregating all of the above.
It's like everyone has an EA, right? Like your executive assistant, like you run into your office, they're like, hey, don't forget you have like a doctor's appointment this afternoon, right? Like you need to have like an AI EA that's kind of like trying to prioritize work for you, surfacing it, but then also helping you achieve that work. It drives you to the doctor's appointment in the scenario, and then you gotta go do the doctor's appointment yourself.
Where do you think when it comes to conversations where most people do have some kind of conversational intelligence right now, right? They're recording their calls, transcripts, etc. Where do you think the biggest sort of opportunity, like easiest opportunity, is that we're not doing today that could just be like a little switch?
Yeah. So if you wanted to just like no tech way of doing this, right? In theory, what you could be doing in 15 minutes, but it's a tough 15 minutes to find each day, is taking the transcripts from Zoom, Teams, Meet, taking those transcripts and putting them into like Claude projects. Like here's a sales meeting, here's a sale. Maybe you get down to the deal level if you're like an enterprise sales rep, right? Like, or here's my product meeting, here's my internal engineering meetings, and you're collating that data in a knowledge base at least. Then when it's time to like execute work, you could help getting that work executed in that specific project, right? So like I have a specific feature I'm talking about. Here's a transcript, right? So you can start to like push the conversations in there. If you're in 5 hours of meetings a day, you should take the 10 to 15 minutes to go grab the transcript, paste it into Claude, right? Like now, like the 5 hours of work is not just lost. It's like a valuable part of my ecosystem. That's probably the easiest low tech way to start to get off the blank page. And then really forcing yourself to use that. Every time I go do work regarding a specific topic, how could I use all of the conversational intelligence I built into a Claude project to help leverage that work?
Yeah. So build your own knowledge base of call transcripts by putting it to one of the existing LLM tools out there.
Yeah, agreed. Exactly right. Super simple. Get off a blank page, and then you can start to figure out what's the thing that I'm doing repetitively that something might be able to automate for me.
Yeah. Let's go back to sales workflow. Again, that's one of my favorite topics here. What do you think? What are some success stories that you have seen with sales teams really effectively using a conversational intelligence to accelerate their deals?
Yeah. So one thing I heard recently, and that's was kind of off the wall, and again, this is a great like low software way of doing it, is how sales managers were managing coaching. So the workflow that was described to me was they actually have a Claude project or an OpenAI project for every one of their reps. And so in those projects, they will cherry pick, let's say, 3 meetings maybe the reps had that week with their prospects, pop those transcripts in into that project, then they'll record their own coaching calls. And the combination of this does 3 things for them. One, walking into a coaching call or prepping for a coaching call, you get to look at historic trends with your coaching calls and the calls that they're having, right? What really simply, what things did they say they were going to do in the past week? Something I always forget as a sales manager. I could, reps are always could just be telling me the same tasks and I'm coaching them on the same things I would never remember. So that's really functional way to do it. But then second, they looked at, great, what could I be coaching my reps on based on the conversations we're having? In the conversation, you're not listening nearly as much as you should be, right? You're thinking about what you're going to say. The AI is always listening, never misses a beat. So it's really good to be like, great, what trends are we seeing? How can I coach them better on my next call? But this is what was really innovative. Like you put that transcript from your coaching discussion, you run it through a series of like pre-written prompts as to how you could have done better. When did you get interruptive? What did you coach them on? What like when did you tell them you should use the Socratic method of questioning when you're coaching? Did you tell them too many things and not ask them enough things, right? Like, and then that post game can make you really like a better sales manager. And then in kind, what'll be interesting is the rep should act accordingly as well. They should prep for the call. Like this is what's going to happen on the call so that we can get like a seamless, like kind of like view as to like, how can I spend as much time growing as a rep, but also getting help identifying risks and closing deals.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It's like you as a manager can have a coach for yourself too. We always think about like coaching as like the manager coaching the rep, but we forget that a lot of managers also need,
Agreed.
yeah.
And that's a layer that never happens, right? I never get coaching on coaching. Like my VP of sales doesn't sit on my calls as a sales manager and say, you should coach better. Like that's just like a black hole when it comes to like coaching. On top of it, I think it's a perfect example of AI. It seems like it's going to make things less personal. This actually made it more personal. Now I have a personalized plan to how
Mm,
I work with like Sarah, my rep, right? Like, and what we've done in the past. This is a
mhm.
good way to like use the vibe code portion of like AI to then grind out a better personal relationship. This should really help fundamentally improved human to human interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that you said was, the reps can use it as a little prep tool for themselves. And I see a lot of reps coming to, one-on-ones like, oh, what do you have to do? Well, nothing. I've got nothing on my plate. But they actually have, 100 things that they could be working on. And so it is also like it's actually also giving back some more autonomy and agency back to the rep to be able to say, okay, these are all the things that you could be talking to your manager about. Do you want to leverage it? Right.
Agreed. Agreed. As a rep, you want to, if like you can see over the past 7 calls, like there's a common theme that your like manager has been talking about, you can get ahead of that theme, right? Like on top of it, as a manager, I want to stay really stable in how I coach. If something is off the wall, right? Like, and it's like, listen, we've never talked about that before. Like, we've never talked about the strategy. We've never talked about like this particular level of like questioning. This is new. Like you can get ahead of that conversation as well. I try not to surprise a rep. The repetition is the plan. It's a really good way to keep repetition on both sides of the fence.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Warren, let's switch topics a little bit here. I wanted to ask you, since you're a three-time founder, what is a business idea you had in the past that you wish AI was there for?
That's a really, really good question. A business idea I've had. Let me think about this a little bit. Let's say this. So my background is in shipping, right? The core of shipping, the whole global economy, moving goods around is managed in email. And the reason it's managed in email is that there is tens of thousands of vendors all across the world to help execute complex shipping. There are trucking companies in Beijing that are the best truckers to move freight in Beijing. And there's no global consolidation of like one trucking company that does it great. Like somebody spins up a new trucking company with 4 trucks and they are great from a rate and service level on that lane. So it'll be like this for a very long time. You'll never see consolidation in shipping. And so when you have that, you can't have like this centralized ERP, SAP to SAP connection to move information around between those counterparties. So email is the best place for shipping, and it will be for a very long time. So if you think about that, email is unstructured communication, right? And it's also very reactive in shipping as well. My customer sends me a message and I respond. There's very little proactive messaging in shipping because there's too much of it, right? Like there's too much information. With like LLMs, what should be happening in the near future is we should be leveraging in that conversation base, right? How can I proactively inform my customer of service problems or rate issues along the way? How can I be getting ahead with my vendors to make sure I'm ahead of issues? If you think about like a typical like operator in a shipping company might be reading like 300 emails a day and responding to 50 of them, right? That's a perfect place for LLMs. I started a digital freight forwarding company in 2017. The comparison of what digital meant in 2017 and what digital should mean now is
Yeah.
like night and day along the way. So that would be the best place. If I can go back in time and just push LLMs, we push machine learning in there, machine learning and LLMs, just like, not anywhere close from a technology standpoint.
So it sounds like a gap that the shipping industry could really like use, could really mitigate with LLMs right now is give more proactive
I have a
data.
hard time because I'm so communication focused, and this is another communication like piece, right? Like everything in the shipping industry is trying to use like LLMs to like scour data to predict service failures. It
Right.
just never happen. It's not going to happen that way. Do it a better way to move. All like shipper intermediaries do is move information around between vendors and customers. Move that information better. LLMs are great at taking huge unstructured data and coming up with a good, this is what this person needs to know. Do you want me to send something like this along? So that would be ideal. I might even start another digital freight forwarding company right after this call, just based on this conversation.
Yeah, and I one the analogy that just popped in my head was, earlier in this call we talked about work basically having turned into like moving conversations from one place to another, and shipping is basically moving goods from one place to another.
That's a good way to put it.
That's really sort of everything has boiled down to what we move and from whom to where.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Cool. Okay, last question here is well, if you were not building this company, what would you be doing?
Yeah. So I think the nature of like startup SaaS work is that it's it's a wonderful like community to be in. It's a wonderful but stressful like career choice to make, right? Like, it's by nature it's a feature and a bug that it's unstable, right? You don't know where it's going to go, which is great. You can take it so many different ways, but in the same token, there's a stress level to that, right? So it's wonderful. And so I started when I was 30. I'm 40 now. Hopefully wrapped up by the time I'm 45. I think it's important. What I've really come to more recently is like got to get back to something that touches the physical world, right? Like for the most part, I've moved around ones and zeros for the past like 10 years, right? So like there's an impact when you really break down industry wise, what's touching people's lives, food, healthcare, shelter, right? Like these are like, there's actually a limited amount of things that like touch a human's day to day life, right? Making an impact in something in that space is definitely on the this is my last software go round, right? Like how do we actually like use just broader technology improvements, maybe not LLMs, but to make an impact on it's not going to be a consumer product, it'll be something like problem solving on the front lines of like, you know what, today my life was a little bit better because I did this thing. I don't know what that is yet. I got to give it one more go at software, but beyond that, I'm out of the SaaS game sometime soon.
Wow. Okay, that's a big claim. I'll talk to you in 2 years, and
If you have any
we'll
ideas, shoot them my way. I've got a
yeah, for
blank slate
sure.
right now. I'll have to ask Claude what I should do in 5 years.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Warren, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave the audience with?
Oh, this has been a great conversation, Laura. I've been following your podcast for a few months now, and I appreciate it. This was really well done.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Warren. And to our listeners, if you like this, please drop a comment, send a like, and then we can send you more of it. Thank you so much, and see you next time.